Tonight, I want you to imagine this. You're deep in the woods. The night is cold. The forest is silent. And the only sound is the faint crackling of your campfire. You think you're alone. But suddenly, from somewhere in the trees, you hear a whistle followed by a voice calling your name. This is not fiction. This is not a campfire tale. This is James' true story. The most terrifying night in the woods he has ever told. James' love for the outdoors. James had always been the kind of man who found peace in the wilderness. Growing up in northern Michigan, he spent countless weekends hiking, fishing, and camping. Nature was a sanctuary, a place where the noise of the modern world couldn't reach him. By the time he was 28, James considered himself an experienced outdoorsman. He knew how to track animals, start a fire in damp conditions, and read the forest like the back of his hand. Friends admired his confidence and often asked him to lead camping trips. But what James loved most was going alone, just him, the trees, and the stars. October was his favorite month to camp. The air was sharp and clean. The leaves glowed with shades of crimson and gold, and the forest seemed alive in a way that was almost magical. He often said the woods felt different in autumn, both beautiful and mysterious, like they were hiding something. That year, he planned a solo weekend trip before winter set in. He packed his gear carefully: a sturdy tent, sleeping bag, matches, a hunting knife, and a small rifle just in case. With everything loaded into his old pickup truck, James drove out to a familiar trail that led deep into the state forest. He had no idea this would be the last time he ever camped alone. The long walk in, the hike, and took nearly 3 hours. James followed a winding path that cut through tall pines and maples, the ground blanketed in fallen leaves that crunched softly under his boots. The deeper he went, the quieter the forest became. Birds grew scarce, and even the rustling of small animals seemed to fade. Finally, he found the spot he always liked, near a narrow creek that trickled through the trees. It was secluded, far from the main trails, but close enough to water. By dusk, James had set up his tent, collected firewood, and started a small campfire. The flames glowed warmly against the encroaching darkness. James ate a simple meal of canned beans, then leaned back against a log, staring up at the stars. The silence of the woods wrapped around him like a blanket. It was peaceful, safe, or so he thought. The first strange sounds. Sometime after midnight, James awoke. At first, he wasn't sure what stirred him, but then he heard it. The sound of footsteps. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Something was moving outside his tent. James held his breath, listening carefully. His first thought was a deer, but the steps were too heavy, too deliberate. They weren't the quick, erratic sounds of an animal. These footsteps were slow, almost cautious, as if whoever, or whatever it was, didn't want to be noticed. Then silence. James lay there in the dark, gripping the handle of his knife. Minutes passed, and eventually he convinced himself it must have been a wandering animal. He was deep in the forest. After all, nothing unusual. But just as he began to drift back into sleep, a sound pierced the silence. A whistle, low, long, unmistakably human. James' eyes shot open. His chest tightened. That wasn't an animal, and no one else was supposed to be out here. A voice in the dark. At first, James thought maybe he was imagining it, but then the whistle came again, closer this time. Then a voice, soft, drawn out, almost playful. Joms. The sound made his blood run cold. His heart pounded as he sat up, knife in hand, trying to stay silent. He hadn't told a soul where he was going. There was no way anyone could know his name. No way anyone should be calling out to him here. The voice echoed again, faint but clear. Joms. It came from the trees, just beyond the glow of his fire. Stalked by whistling. James stayed frozen, hardly daring to breathe. The voice faded. Then the whistling returned, circling the camp like a predator toying with its prey. Sometimes it was far off. Sometimes it was alarmingly close. At one point, he swore he heard it directly behind his tent. The seconds dragged into hours. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, but his survival instincts told him to stay put, at least until daylight. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe a hunter had wandered too far. But deep down he knew the voice wasn't normal. The way it moved around his camp wasn't normal. It was watching him, playing with him. The thing in the trees. Around 3 a.m., James couldn't take the suspense anymore. He slowly unzipped his tent just an inch to peek outside. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a dim red light across the clearing. The trees stood tall and shadowed, their branches swaying lightly in the breeze. And that's when James saw it. At the edge of the clearing, just beyond the glow of the fire, stood a figure. Tall, thin, motionless, its head tilted unnaturally to one side, like it was studying him. Even from a distance, James could see its skin, or what looked like skin, pale, almost luminous in the moonlight. The face was featureless at first glance, but then a grin stretched across it, wide, too wide. James' breath caught in his throat. He pulled the zipper shut silently and sat there, shaking. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't human. And then, just feet from his tent, the whistling began again. The flight through the woods. James knew he couldn't wait until morning. If he stayed, he wouldn't survive. He waited, listening, until the whistling moved to the far side of the camp. Then, in one swift motion, he grabbed his backpack, shoved his essentials inside, and bolted. He didn't even bother with his flashlight. He ran by moonlight alone, his knife in one hand, bag in the other. Branches tore at his clothes, roots caught at his boots. But adrenaline kept him going. Behind him, faint but growing closer, he heard it. Joms. His name, carried through the forest like a death call. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs felt like lead. But finally, mercifully, he saw it. The faint outline of the trailhead sign, glowing under the pale moonlight. His truck was there, his salvation. James threw himself inside, slammed the locks, and started the engine. As the headlights cut across the trees, he swore, just for a moment. He saw the figure standing at the tree line, watching, grinning. He didn't look twice. He drove. He drove faster than he ever had in his life, not daring to stop until miles of pavement separated him from that forest. The aftermath. James never went camping again. He still hikes during the day, but he refuses to step foot in the forest after sunset. When people ask him why, he doesn't like to tell the story. But when he does, he always ends with the same words. Whatever was out there that night, it knew my name. It wasn't human. And it wanted me to know I was never alone. Even now, years later, James says there are nights when he hears the wind whistle through the trees, and his heart skips a beat, because it sounds exactly like the voice that followed him that night. That was James' story, the most terrifying night in the woods he has ever told. But I'll leave you with one question. What do you think was stalking him? A lost man with dark intentions? A spirit tied to the forest? Or something older? Something that doesn't belong in our world at all? The woods hold secrets we may never understand. And sometimes, the most frightening thing isn't the darkness itself, but what waits within it. So the next time you step into the forest at night, remember James, and remember the sound of the whistle, because if you hear your name in the dark, you might not make it out.